Well, hopefully I can talk loud enough for everybody to hear me. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, that's fantastic. Well, on behalf of the Land Trust of North Alabama, I would like to welcome you to this program that we put together. My name is Andy Pruitt. I'm the land manager with the Land Trust, and along with Elizabeth Motes, one of our education coordinators, we've been able to put this program together with the generous support and help of our panelists tonight, and I'll introduce them here in just one second. But just the way this whole thing came about, the City of Huntsville approached the Land Trust to talk a little bit about the urban kind of wildfire interface. In other words, we have a lot of properties that abut some of the subdivisions and some of the urban areas of the city. And with all the fires going on around the country, North Carolina, out west, and, you know, in the past, what happened in Tennessee and things like that. So, you know, they were rightfully concerned, are we in a good place in terms of us dealing with sudden wildfire? So we were happy to assist the city with this. So working with Elizabeth and some of our foresters that are on a resource advisory committee, we were able to make introductions with our panelists here, all of them experts in their field, to put this program together, to provide some information to the community about what to do, who are the players, what happens in an emergency, some things like that. And then dealing with some of the basic things on a daily basis. What's a burn ban? You know, what are some of those things? And some of the ways that you can be aware of wildfire in your neighborhood, in your specific community, and also how to prevent. So best protect yourself and best be prepared. You know, the old Boy Scout motto, be prepared. It applies to many, many different things. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. We've got 3 areas of discussion that we're going to have with our panelists. One is, who are the players? You know, everybody knows Huntsville City Fire, but there's the Alabama Forestry Commission. There's lots of different resources, and all of them have different parts of the role to play in an urban wildfire. The other thing is what information is available out there. And on the back tables, we have quite a bit of information that you're welcome to take with you. If we don't have enough copies of something, just let us know and give us an email address and we can get you that information. But finally, then what we're going to do is how to respond in an emergency. Those are the 3 areas that we're going to talk about tonight. And to do that, we've got some great panelists. We've got Robert Maddox with the Alabama Forestry Commission. We have Chief Mac McFarland with the City of Huntsville Fire Department. And we have Fire Marshal Dan Wilkerson, also with the City of Huntsville Fire Department. And we also have Bob Hausman, who's representing the American Society of Foresters, the North Alabama chapter. It's a local group of foresters that work on a lot of forestry issues and things, everything from fire to burns, anything like that. They're just experts and provide lots of guidance and education in the community. So that's going to be kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So what I thought we could maybe do is kind of start with our panelists a little bit, and each one of them kind of go through and talk a little bit about who they are and what agency they represent and how they fit within this mosaic of fire prevention. So Dan, why don't we just start with you since you're there at the end of the table.
All right. Dan Wilkerson, I'm a native of the city of Huntsville. I was born here in 1972. I previously was in retail management, but joined the fire department in 2001. I've been the fire marshal for about 11 years. We focus on public education, fire inspections, fire investigations, and we do plans reviews for all the new projects. So any aspect that involves fire prevention or code enforcement, we're involved in.
Okay, Robert, you want to go talk a little bit about Alabama Forestry Commission?
Well, I'm Robert Maddox. I'm a forester, wildland firefighter, and certified burn manager with the Alabama Forestry Commission for just a little over 20 years. Hit my anniversary back in April. I'm the supervisor of Lawrence, Limestone, Madison, and Morgan counties. So if you have a call in any one of those counties about your tree, you'll be talking to me. Our main role in the wildland urban interface and with wildfires is, I like to joke, if you call us because your house is on fire, we will save the yard. Structure, I leave The chief. We handle things that they can't get a hose to or is going to be more than a fire department can handle. We don't fight fire with water, we fight fire with dirt, with bulldozers. It is messy but effective. And we go wherever that fire went to contain it. We don't suppress wildfires, we let them burn themselves out. And we'll get a little more into that a little bit later. But anyway, we're the folks to call when it's hit the fan. And it gets off into the woods.
Okay. I'm Matt McFarland. I'm Fire Chief of Huntsville Fire and Rescue. And a little bit about me, probably for this type of situation we're talking about, I've been blessed to be in some situations I think helps me out. Normally, when you're dealing with a municipal fire department, they don't have a lot of experience in anything other, just like what Matt said, they deal with that, we deal with structure fires and stuff. However, on the side of that, I actually got started in the fire service a long time ago, right out of high school. I grew up in Newmarket, a little north of here, and I got interested in the volunteer fire department up there. So I actually spent 20 years with the volunteer fire service parallel to my career in Huntsville, and then one time was the chief of the Newmarket Fire Department, which we actually, in the country fire department, we got a lot of experience with the mountains on fire, with fields on fire, so gained a lot of experience that actually helps me now to have a background, somewhat of a background in that, of understanding how that works. And I came to work for Huntsville Fire in 1983. This year I'll be here 42 years. I've been in the chief's position since 2013. I came up through the ranks of all different ranks, from firefighter to driver engineer to captain, all the way up through. And right now my responsibility is fire protection for the city of Huntsville, whatever it is. And it's great to have, we all work as good partners. We worked on this the last route we had. Many times we worked together on stuff, trying to keep that down, but our job is going to, Huntsville Fire Department is going to be, we got a lot of trucks and equipment, we can handle it if it's close to the road. We're about 500 personnel strong for Huntsville Fire and Rescue. By the time we divide it over 3 shifts, I got about 125 people on at any given time for fire suppression personnel throughout the city to protect the city of Huntsville.
Good evening, my name is Bob Houseman. I am representing the Society of American Foresters, the Mountain Lakes chapter, which is the Northern Alabama chapter. There's 9 chapters of the Society of American Foresters in Alabama. We're one of 3 states in the Southeast Society of American Foresters, and it's a national organization out of Washington. So I am here representing 24 other members. They're mostly foresters and natural resource managers. Many of them still employed. Some of them, like me, retired. But as a career, I am a forester. I retired in 2022 with the U.S. Forest Service as a National Incident Commander, one of 4 National Incident Management teams with the U.S. Forest Service. I was with them for just under 15 years in that role as an Incident Commander and an Operations Section Chief. Prior to that, I had 24 years with the state of North Carolina, Division of Forest Resources, a state Forest Service organization. So I had a 41-year career in forestry and wildland fire management. I have worked across the country as well as within individual states. I cannot say I ever worked in Alabama. I worked in several southeastern states, including North Carolina, where my home was for many years before coming to Alabama. So I have experience at the local, state, and national level with organization for response to wildland fires. I've also had experience with collaboration and coordination and working with partners in building a plan of action for various different locations and communities across the country, and how that works well and well that doesn't necessarily work well. So I've seen a lot. I'm very, very thankful for all the folks I've had a chance to work with, and these are very excellent individuals who represent very excellent organizations up here to serve Huntsville and the surrounding areas here in Madison County. I'm glad to be here, and I'm very, very honored to be with this group of individuals, and I commend the Land Trust for putting this on. This, I think, is extremely important, and for reasons we can share as we move along. Thank you.
And if I could throw in on that just a moment, this group of folks and stuff you did is what actually taught the rest of the fire service how to do incident command. We learned from stuff they set up on how we could command stuff, structure fires and everything, but it's their model they developed that actually taught the rest of the fire service how to manage our resources.
Well, once again, I want to thank all of you for participating with our discussion tonight. As you can see, we've got some great representatives of the different agencies and resources that are out there. And one thing that's important to understand, they talk a lot about what they do, but there's other components to what they do. They also provide education and information and they're another resource than just calling 911. And there's things that they can provide and help you with and provide guidance and support. Like I said, there's a lot of information out there and things that you can do to best be prepared. So that's what we'll talk a little bit about now is what information is available. If I pick up the phone and I'm going to call and say, I've got this property right at the base of the mountain, and I'm not sure if I'm well prepared. Who do you call? What do you do? So I'll throw that to the panel a little bit and say, what should somebody do if they have some questions about whether or not they're properly prepared?
Well, if they're in the city limits, I defer to the chief here, but if they want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to come out and take a look. Any one of my guys are happy to come out and take a look. We've all had the training. I guess being the veteran of it, we want to take a swing at it, take one of them along. But we work for the state, we're here to help.
I think the good thing you're going to find about this panel, I'm just learning you for the first time, but the rest of us, Robert and I worked together back a year or two ago when we had the major drought. We was on the phone just about daily trying to work out plans of what we was going to do. He said, we got a great collaboration, like he was talking about when he flipped that to the city, but I'm going to be the guy calling him to double check my plan. We worked together really well to make sure it's all protected.
He walked me through my first press conference.
Well, we did well.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that we'll be able to provide once we're completed the program tonight and everything and subsequent information, we'll have some links and some phone numbers and some things that will be available on our website for you to reach back out to us and follow up with some of the information that you've got tonight. Someone out at the base of the mountain, what's the biggest concern? Whether it's up the hill in the mountain or it's in the neighborhood down below. What are some of the biggest concerns that you as firefighters have in terms of whether or not you're approaching a place that's been prepared?
Okay, I'll give the typical forester answer, and you back me up on this. It depends. If it's an EMS call or a non-fire call, can the property or the home be easily accessed? Is the driveway wide enough? Are the trees trimmed up to 13.5 feet, which is minimum for heavy trucks? Is your signage of your home, is it easily readable from the road? Are the numbers on the mailbox easily readable from the road? First part's finding you, second part's getting to you. Is there enough room for if a larger engine or another, something big comes to your home, is there enough room to turn around? These are all, first steps. Going into the fire side, if you're worried about a wildfire either coming around the mountain, down the mountain, from the side of the mountain to your home, where do you have a defensible zone established? And what I mean by that is, have you landscaped or done things in such a way as to reduce the ignition probability of your home? Because what we found is most homes don't go up from the flame front. It's the embers in front of the flame front and what they land on and what they start. So, are the gutters clean? Is your home made out of non-combustible materials as much as you can? Have you raked out underneath your deck? The firewood pile, is it up next to your house or is it off in the tree line? Just trying to make your home the least flammable it can be. And you selected plant species that will easily ignite. There's a number of different steps. Many of them are detailed in the publications back there. Please feel free to take them. We don't pay you to take them home. And I'll give everybody else a chime in.
I could echo the same thing. It's what we're looking at. I guess we're looking at it like take one step back. If it's burning towards you, what can we do to help stop it? And hopefully we can get a truck close enough to your house, as he alluded to earlier. But we got to have that roadway. We've got some areas on some of the mountains around here that people's built way off the road, and we have to be honest, cannot get a fire truck down there. We may consider a small fire truck down there, and then if we get down there, we're a long way from the water source. The difference is, most city fire departments are used to fighting fires with water. Now we do there is a thing, one of the things I've actually wanted to do some more training. I'm probably going to reach out to these guys to help me with our thing. From what I experienced, and what I'm going to say as a county firefighter, parallel to here, is the thing is, he talked to earlier, just letting it burn out, but contain it so you're done with it, is building fire breaks. We're not going to be able to, we may be able to protect your house with a fire hose off the truck, but the reality is if it's down in the woods, you can't get equipment down there. It's going to have to be manual. We have put, all of our trucks now carry leaf blowers on the truck, and that's to build a fire break with. For us in this area up here, we can build a fire break with it a lot quicker than we can a rake trying to build it. So we have done that on the mountain time or two up here. We had some small stuff, just build a break around it and use a leaf blower. So that's one of the things that we have to get down in it, but the challenge is we can't get water down there to it. You're still going to have stumps and stuff that's burning, that you still get embers off of, if the wind's blowing, that you got to deal with. But preparing around your house will help us. It's exactly what Robert just said a minute ago. Preparing around it to make sure that you got stuff where it doesn't burn up through the, and these guys can speak better what I'm fixing to say. I'm not the expert on this. They can speak better to it, but the stuff that everybody saw a lot of the areas on TV, and you probably worked in a lot of it, but some of it, the type of trees and stuff we have is a different deal. We normally don't see the stuff around here a lot in most of the areas of what we call crowning, where it's getting up in the top of the trees and running. We're dealing with ground cover fires. It's burning the leaves, burning sticks along the way. It's a smaller flame, but not like what you see on the big news reports. So it's a different type of animal, and y'all can expand better on that than I could.
Yeah, hardwood fuel types are going to burn a little differently than the conifer fuel types that you see predominantly. You can see them out west a lot in your mountain regions, but you do have them here, even in this area, where you have pockets of pine that will burn far more intense than what perhaps a hardwood fuel type might burn. However, I will say this: when you have the right conditions, under the right timing, and the all the elements together, a fire can still burn rather intensely. And as Robert said it very well, a lot of what threatens your homes isn't necessarily the flaming front itself, although eventually that will. It's all the embers that it is blowing ahead of itself. The wind is carrying it, what's called the head fire. And those embers are what are landing on structures or on flammable material around the structures that will generally ignite the whatever it might be, in this case, say your residence, your home. So it is very important, no matter what, if the fuel type that might be surrounding your area. And in this location, I understand, yeah, I'm looking at it and been here for a while, it's a lot of it's hardwood. So it's not going to burn with greater intensity, but at certain times of the year under the right conditions, it can still burn. And Robert can give you a lot more experience of those type of situations in this area than I can. However, when I go back to what can we do, well, whether it's at the bottom, mid, or upper on the top of the ridgetop, where you live, what is your ingress and egress? Many of the situations that have turned into catastrophic situations that I've been exposed to around the country is when communities are threatened very quickly with a wildland fire, and they're trying to get out in a very one-way situation. Is that what you are facing? So I would encourage residents to understand, where I live, is there a multiple access, ingress, egress for accessing my property, or is it one way in and one way out? And if the fire is threatening your community, your residential area, and you're trying to get out, the fire department and the wildland fire services are trying to get in. And a lot of times it creates a cluster effect, and it slows that response process down. So have in mind in advance, what is my evacuation options? Where do I go? Is it a one-way in, one-way out? And we as firefighters have to assess that as well. Can we get equipment in safely, because we don't want to put our firefighters at unnecessary risk as well? Can we get in safely? Can we get out as well safely? And an experience in the past too, it's where you have these fires that require a multiple response of resources. They're already training together and they're working well in coordination, and it's generally under what Chief has said, the incident command system, so they're ready to coordinate. The wildland fire services are looking at what tactical operations can successfully impede the progress of the fire towards a valuable structure, a high valuable element such as a community, the structural firefighters skilled and trained in actually combating that flaming front and that fire source against that structure. And they're working together in unison. And at the same time, the residents, the community members are trying to do what they can to either exit or to stay and where they are, and can you do that safely? I would say one of the greatest things a resident can do for protecting their property and making it as resilient as they can is identifying how can I make it more defensible. And there's a lot of material that the chief and what Robert with the Alabama Commission can provide in how that can be accomplished and what are those areas that need to be focused on. They've already mentioned several. It's what's your property construction made of, what do you have around your property, how can I widen my defensible space if a fire is coming towards us, how can I slow that fire down and impede it from coming to my structure, and if I'm getting embers coming in with the wind, what around it could ignite, how can I mitigate in advance, and taking action well in advance of anything like that happening.
Well, it sounds like, I remember when I was young, and there were a number of things with the fire department would come to school or whatever, and they'd always talk about a plan for a house fire. You know, how to plan to evacuate a house if your house catches on fires and everything like that. But I don't think we really got much of a message about what to do in a wildland fire. So I think that what you're talking about is having a plan. It's not only for evacuating the house, but it's also evacuating the area if you have to. So you have to expand that plan to best prepare yourselves. What are some of the biggest considerations in terms of being prepared that they can do? Some of the, you talk about having a leaf blower, just blowing leaves out or what? You know, to be honest, I have a yard that has pretty heavily wooded, and sometimes those leaves sit there for quite a while. I guess I would put to the panel, what are some of the basic things that you can do around your home that don't take a lot of resources, they don't take a lot of, it's just a little bit of time and effort. What are some of the best things that they could do?
You know, you hit on it. You know, when you plan for a house fire, you make sure you have a couple ways out. Obviously, you want to try to prevent any fire that could occur. And then in firefighter training, you're taught there's three things you got to have a fire. You got to have fuel, you got to have heat, you got to have oxygen. And a lot of the things that you're going to do to address these situations is try to limit the fuel. And especially in a wildfire, the wind can drive it, the vertical slopes can drive the fire, but you need to have that fuel chain for fire to go from one spot to another. Obviously, the heat can transfer and set other things on fire, but I was watching tests with the embers where they showed a home that had done the things that you had mentioned. They didn't have mulch, they used rocks around the house. Part of it, and the other part, they had vegetation, and they was blowing embers at the structure, and the part that had the vegetation, it caught on fire, was fully involved. The other one hadn't even started burning yet. So, I mean, that buys you time. My primary concern is life safety. I don't think any property is worth losing your life over. I don't think any possession is worth losing your life over. So I would be aware of any kind of news releases on evacuations and advise you to follow that. I know we see on the news where people are heroes because they stay behind with the water hose trying to save their property. You don't ever want to do that and get trapped in a situation where you can't get out. And then people having to use resources to try to get you out when you could have safely evacuated earlier instead of trying to mitigate the overall emergency. I know down in the city, we see a lot of people using pine mulch. And pine mulch, we have a lot of outside fires from. You know, there's the self-extinguishing cigarettes people thought couldn't start fires. We see cigarettes start fires all the time. And then A lot of times you don't necessarily get an outside fire that burns into a structure, but that's one of the ones when you mulch up against a house that has a combustible exterior, that we do see that fire transitioning into the home. So any of the non-combustible stuff, if you live near a wooded area, like they said, the defensible space, Huntsville doesn't have a lot of regulations that require distances between residents and wooded areas. But that doesn't mean you can't do it on your own just because it's not regulated. And we mentioned the home that's next to a mountain. Down on the bottom of the mountain, I would be more concerned about that home having a fire transitioning into a wildfire versus the opposite happening because of the transition of the heat and the fuel ladder that goes up the mountain. But I think a lot of it is staying aware of the situation if it occurs. I did pull up some risk maps today, and I sent one in. But it shows that our area is relatively low on hazards. You can see by the color of the map that we fall in that low area. Now there's some moderate areas as well, but there's a lot of different factors that play into this, density of the area, those type of things. But anytime where we have lack of rain, it's going to increase that risk, and that's when we have to initiate the other avenues of burn bans and those types of things. We do a good job in Huntsville that we don't just allow open burning. Campfires, or not campfires, but cooking fires is the only thing that's exempt from not burning outside. Or if you do burn, like clearing the land, you got to have a burn permit for that. So we monitor that pretty closely, and we get calls all the time from people with illegal burning, and we actively enforce that.
Thank you.
That brings up a good question, and understanding what a burn ban is actually. There's different degrees of a ban and things like that. Is it when there's a burn ban, the city of Huntsville has a little bit more stringent maybe than the county. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the differences of what the burn ban actually means?
Yeah, so there's an annual burn ban that happens during the summer months every year. And a lot of people think that's because of fire risk, but it actually has to do with ozone and air pollution. It has nothing to do with fire risk. And any county, and I may be misspeaking because it's more Forestry Commission, right?
It's ADM.
Oh, ADM, I'm sorry. It's ADM.
They just leave it
So-
to us to tell everybody about it. There's not too
I
bad.
always go to your website for it. So ADM, if you've got a county that has a large city,
Okay.
then because of the pollution and the ozone, then that county cannot burn during the summer months. And it usually runs, I think, from April to October.
May 1st to November 1st.
Okay. And so,
Been dealing with it for 18 and a half years. I had to run it backwards and forwards. 3 of my 4 counties are in it.
so we know during that time frame that we don't even issue permits for burning unless we're on site. We may have a bonfire or something for a school that we have a fire engine at monitoring it. And in the city of Huntsville, if we do a ceremonial permit like that, we're there to light the fire and extinguish it per our city ordinances. But then the control burns that are natural resource office issues, they have to dig a pit to burn in and have a smoke curtain, but they cannot do that during these ban months as well. But any time that somebody issues a burn ban like happened during the drought, then we enforce that. And I remember we had several people out where neighbors were calling, hey, this guy's barbecuing and stuff. And the grills were actually allowed during that time, but if you had a fire pit in your backyard, you couldn't use it. So we did a lot of enforcement through that, a lot of education about that. Obviously, we don't want to do anything in those times. And with the drought, the moisture content in the vegetation is not there. If you've ever tried to ignite wet wood, you know the difference in how wet wood burns and dry wood. It's the same principle. And then if you get dead vegetation like leaves and stuff that's dried out, that stuff's going to ignite pretty easily. So During those times, we have to be very cautious to limit any kind of ignition sources that might ignite dry vegetation like that. So, but we follow the state's recommendations on those type of burn bans. Usually that's handed down from the state, and they communicate with us so we can enforce it. But then we also have the ban during the summer months. We still allow the little commercial fire pits that you can buy at Lowe's and Home Depot during the summer months. And then your cooking fires are still exempt, but any other fires during the summer months are not allowed. And we had a challenge in Huntsville because years ago we used to pick up leaves with vacuum trucks. You could rake your leaves to the curb, vacuuming up. Well, then they changed that policy. Then you had to bag them and put them at the street. And a lot of people quit taking care of their leaves, or they wait till early spring to clean up the yard. So it allowed that vegetation to lay around longer than what we was accustomed to seeing. But I can tell you, as far as fire occurrences, we're pretty low in, relatively speaking, throughout the years on outside fire occurrences. Not to say that we couldn't have one and we couldn't have a big one, but we do have a pretty aggressive restriction on what you can burn in the city.
So if I want to put together a little burn barrel, I got a 55-gallon drum back in my yard, and I want to burn some yard rubbish and things like that, who do I call to find out if there is a ban in place?
You can't do it in the city of Huntsville.
Okay.
You can't burn rubbish in the city of Huntsville.
Okay. Like trees, like leaves, limbs, things like that?
Can't burn it.
Okay.
Can't do it.
Solve that problem.
So the only thing we allow is for you to put it out. Now there is exemption if your area doesn't have trash pickup, that you can do that. But I don't know of any that we have in the city. But the city requires you to put it at the road. If it's leaves, you bag it up, and then the city picks it up.
Okay.
Again, the only burning you're allowed to do, if it's not in a fire pit, like a small fire pit, following manufacturer's recommendation, the only burning you could do would be a cooking fire.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about you burning rubbish with a pack of hot dogs.
Right.
You're actually cooking. That's the only exemption to our burning policy.
Okay. All right. What are the biggest, yes, sir?
So how big is a cooking, you may not be able to say specifically, but how big is a cooking fire?
How big is a cooking fire? I mean, it doesn't specify in the ordinance.
Common sense sort of thing?
Common sense is a superpower.
You know, you can get out there, if they've got a bonfire and they're saying they're cooking, that's not a cooking fire. And a lot of people don't cook over an open fire anymore. But if it's a small fire and they've got a cast iron pot over it, kind of like the old campfires, I mean, those things would be the type that would be exempt. But you also have to use some, you know, try to contain the fire with bricks or something around the fire. You know, you don't want to, you know, just have a ground fire and not be able to contain it. But you also should have a way to extinguish it there, whether it's an extinguisher or a garden hose or something. We do allow barrels with clean wood to be used as warming fires during the winter months for construction sites, but it's so restricted that most people don't do it. It's more work than it is good. We used to see 3 or 4 a year, and I can't remember the last time we did a warming fire permit, because you got to be away from structures, you got to be away from power lines, you got to be away from trees, and then you know you got to use clean wood. They can't just use rubbish from the construction site. Those type of things. A lot of the complaints that we go out on is developers that are building houses or something, and they're trying to burn debris without having to haul it off. We get several of those calls. But like I said, we're pretty fortunate. It's still a relatively low occurrence. Our burning permits that we do allow where they dig the pits, they can only burn between 8 and 3, I believe. They can't load wood after 3 o'clock. They always have to be on site, and they always have to have their permit there. So we occasionally will go out to a burn pit that was permitted and it's still burning after dark, and we'll either fill it with water or we'll have them fill it in with dirt to extinguish it. And usually once you do that, if they're gonna burn again, they gotta dig a new pit, because that pit will be ruined.
One thing I hear about, whenever you hear the reports on the news and everything, it was either a light fire, it was something struck a power line, it could have been a number of things. What's the most common source of a fire? Is it accidental? Is it deliberate? Is it mistakes? Is it, what's the biggest thing that you find?
You will go sitting in the lake.
We'll go with you, because I don't have any of them.
Okay. With the Forestry Commission, the most common cause of a wildfire is debris burning, whether that be woody debris, with folks cleaning up their yards, clearing off a piece of property, or in the case of Lawrence County and other counties that don't have countywide garbage pickup, it's garbage dumps. So just piles of either household garbage or woody debris, and folks light it and leave it.
In the city, we haven't had an overwhelming number of we've had fires here and there. Sometimes it's machinery that may cause it. I remember one time as a firefighter, we had several grass fires along the railroad from a malfunctioning brake on the train. And as the train came through town, we was chasing behind it, trying to put the fires out.
I got a story for that.
But the main cause, like I said, a lot of these apartment complexes that you're seeing coming up, they'll put pine straw down, and then we'll run cigarette fires where they're throwing the cigarette butts down, and the pine straw has oil in it, so it's easy to ignite. Sometimes when I'm not in the city and I've got a campfire going, I use pine straws to get it started. But I don't think people realize the danger in that as a mulch around your home. A lot of the contractors use it because it's easy to put out, it's relatively inexpensive, but then it does readily burn just by flicking down a cigarette.
One of the things that the Land Trust is proud of, and what we do a lot is, we have a lot of natural areas within the city limits. We've got our preserves in the city limits, larger than Central Park. We've got houses sitting at the base of these mountains and everything. And then people see Pigeon Forge, and they see the chimney top fire that happened there. And, can that happen here? How would you assess our general environment in terms of, because we do have such an integrated environment with our natural spaces and our urban spaces. How would you guys look at our environment? Is it obviously there's different degrees, but.
Yeah, if you look at the density in Pigeon Forge, where they're building cabins on top of cabins, and there's no space between them. We're pretty fortunate that some of the homes that we're getting in these areas where the trees are, they're not right together. Usually they're large lots, homes are separated from each other. But then you think of the construction materials or those cabins that they're building, they're wood cabins. There's not usually in a brick exterior facade or anything. It's not an asbestos facade, that it's usually wood. And once you get a fire going and you're creating that heat, then that heat can ignite larger items easier. And then you just go from one cabin to another cabin. And then once you outgrow your resources, then it just goes where the fuel is. Another thing you should take note as well is when you're talking about Pigeon Forge, you're talking several mountains that are very steep, to where down here our mountains are a little bit different, in my opinion.
Right.
So there's a little bit more forgiveness in that. And again, not to say that it couldn't happen, but again, in the park up there, and again, you probably talk better on this than me, but when I was a kid, I was always told, if a tree falls in a national park, you gotta leave it. So you end up with a lot of vegetation on the ground, and then if you get a fire going like that, then that's there versus areas that's not a natural park that you may have somebody going there and cleaning up and doing those type of activities. But again, I think the landscape and the density is different where we are now versus, or where we are here versus up there.
Well said. We've got a lot more access, the roads are a bit better. You touched on the building material of the homes, that is key. Wildfire doesn't see a home, it sees fuel. And if you like the log cabin aesthetic, that's fine, but there is risk there. And to mitigate that risk, or create that defensible space, knock the woody material back, go with some greener landscaping, choose fire-resistant species, go with rocks instead of mulch. There's a number of different things. We got a really excellent publication back there, 50 Ways to Protect Your Home in the Woodlands. There's also a spiral-bound checklist of different things that we've all hit on that you can, just things to think about. The signage of your home, the width of the road. Do you know where your nearest hydrant is? Just, stuff that if you didn't hear it, you wouldn't be thinking about it. So I encourage all of you to take one with you when you go.
One thing I'd like to just throw in the hopper is that I think they're exactly right that this area here has some similarity to the chimney tops situation there at Gatlinburg in 2016. Not nearly the severity of situation that they had. However, I would say this as well. You never say never. Because even though I believe what we have here in Madison County and parts of Jackson County, particularly with the topography and the fuel types, is you always have potential. What I would call it is probably a very low probability of such an occurrence. However, if one were to take place, it could quickly become a high consequence. It's exactly what you saw on Gatlinburg fire. Low probability, high consequence in the outcome, tragically, and it was a perfect storm. What I would say too here is that in our area, we have urban interface. Urban interface is where we have development, human development, such as subdivisions and cities and other type of structures that are built adjacent to or inside of within a land base undeveloped, in this case a forested area, woodland area. And with that, then you always have the potential that something can come from the woodland area on an ignition source to the structure, or the structure to the woodland area, because they're trying to live cohabitably together in that area. We love to live in the woods. We love to live adjacent. I do, personally, I do. I just enjoy it very much. But I always have to remind myself there's the risk factor. Even where I live personally, there's always a chance that there could be an ignition source. Robert said it's mostly debris burning. And when I was in North Carolina, that's what predominantly was our cause of wildfires, were human-caused debris burns. And we would categorize them either unintended, accidental, or negligent because they slipped the burn and walked away on a day that they shouldn't have been lighting matches, or it was intentional. We have arson involved. And then you kind of break it into those three categories. So here in the southeast of the United States, the predominant cause of our fires is human. We do have lightning fires. We have lightning. We get it a lot around here, I'm finding out. Florida probably has the most lightning strikes of any geographic area in the country. But as has been shared already, the fuel types and the moisture, certainly that we have in the southeast, prevents a lot of those natural ignitions from getting up and running, except when you have prime conditions. And we've seen that across the last 3 or 4 decades, where there have been very large conflagrations in places like Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia and Virginia and Alabama. So you can have it. Out west, you take west of the Mississippi and certainly the Continental Divide, it's lightning. the predominant ignition source out there is lightning until you get into some of the more populated areas on the west coast, where they have people actually do what we do here with sun fires. So just keep that in mind, that even though where we are here in northern Alabama, a beautiful area of the country, it truly is, there's still always that potential because we have similar conditions, though not as extreme as what other places might have. And that's why it always is prudent for each of us then to take the measures we can, either individually as homeowners and residents, to make our homes as defendable as possible. And there's a lot of good information that's available back there on that table from the commission and certainly on their websites, and certainly here in the city of Huntsville, things that can be done by yourselves to protect your homes and make them defendable as much as possible. And then I would also extend that to the collaborative component that goes into what's happening tonight. It's the discussion with those individuals that represent resources, that represent organizations, the fire department for Huntsville, the Forestry Commission for Alabama, and there's many others as well that can get involved in collaborative planning with all of us as residents and where we happen to live. What can we do? And it goes back to, well, what can we do? It's, we can build a plan. And there are different tools out there that are available across the country here in Alabama, in the community, to build a wildfire prevention plan that involves what we do individually in the home to protect our particular residents, what we do in our particular subdivision or community as joint homeowners to make ourselves more defendable against fire, and what we do within our communities and our cities, working with public officials and emergency responders to help build a plan that addresses the what if this happens to us. How will we respond, as we've been addressing through this evening so far? So all that takes into account the fact that it can happen. And that's why I sent that information to you. And it was never say never. I'll give you a great quick example of a little wildland fire in the Sierra National Forest in California about 10 years ago. Large river drainage runs on the south end of that forest, east to west. Large river drainage. The fire was on the north of that particular canyon drainage. And everyone on that fire that we were working with, from the national forest to the counties to the state, all had from past experience said, it'll never cross the river drainage to the south. It never has. In recorded history, it never had. A week later, that's exactly what it did. And because we forced that discussion, kind of like in this group setting here, we forced that discussion around what if, because there were values at risk on the south side of that canyon drainage. And there was a community, one road in, one road out. And so we forced that discussion that, yeah, it's a low probability that never has happened apparently. But what if? Because there's about 100 different residents down here who could potentially be trapped if it does. And because we forced that discussion, hence the comparative of what we're doing tonight, we're having a discussion. It brings to light, well, okay, well, if it did, what would we do? And without a lot of detail, there was an action plan put into place that evening, and within the next 3 days, there was an evacuation. And within that week, that fire crossed that drainage and it trapped some folks that were in there. They survived, but it did trap them. So again, I use that as just an example that we can have things happen that maybe we didn't think were even possible. And what's already been shared up here by all of the folks that are representing these organizations, agencies, and responders, it can. Under right conditions, it can. So what can we do to take preventative measures in the meantime while it's not doing that? And that's what the opportunity is here tonight.
That's great. And so that, to bring this back together in terms of the planning that everybody we hope can do and all that kind of stuff, I've taken some measures of my house. I think I've got things lined up, but I still have different agencies. We've touched on it a little bit earlier. who do I call maybe to say, hey, could you come and check out? Am I on the right track? Am I going in the right direction? Is there a resource that we can reach out to say, to come and take a look and provide some guidance?
As far as wildfires?
Yeah, and I'm thinking here because there's that gray area between the city structure and the wildland, you know, and so who do you call first?
Yeah, the city, I mean, the city is more than willing to come out and do home surveys anytime. But when you're specifically talking about wildland fires, these guys are the experts.
We'd rather help you on the front end than roll in on when things have hit the fan.
Well, thinking about that,
We got a question.
yeah. Where was it?
Something I'm curious about, you have all these resources, but there was no mention of like a helicopter bucket sort of a thing, but is that
Okay.
available?
All right, the last time the helicopter bucket drop happened was over in Gurley on Killing Mountain a few years ago. There was a 13-acre fire on a hardwood plateau that coincidentally was started by debris burning and it ran up the bluff. It was in hardwood litter and it just would not go out. So the Forestry Commission, along with a volunteer team of A&M college students from the College of Forestry, spent all day mopping up or basically reinforcing the lines and making sure everything was cold out all day. Aaliyah, bless their hearts, the state
You
troopers.
do that in South, can't you? I don't know where it's going.
Well, they gobble up all our long distance, so it's a love-hate relationship. But anyway, the state troopers have an excellent pilot who is more than willing to do bucket drops. And then we have to find a place for him to dip in a pond, and hopefully the landowners don't fuss too much, and, you know, and it's not well stocked with fish. We're not taking all this fish and dumping it on fire. That's a little joke. And so, yeah, he ran bucket drops, probably 30 that day in coordination with our pilot. So we do have a mechanism in place. And if you remember a few more years back, there was the big, almost 600-acre fire in Shelby County that was running mountaintop to mountaintop. He ran probably 200 drops a day, in one day. And the story goes, he opened up the door to the helicopter and just fell out. Well, he was tired. It's all right. They got him hooked up to an IV. He was fine. But he worked himself to death trying to get to inaccessible places. That's another issue we face with wildland fire. Is hard to get to inaccessible places. Y'all are well acquainted with all the rock bluffs and rocky area around here. Well, our bulldozers don't like rocks. Metal tracks on rocks do not get along. That's when you have to go to hand tools and put roots on the ground. It's slower, it's more labor intensive, and it's a lot less safe than using the machine. So that in combination with, yes, we do have a helicopter resource, and I'll go back even further in history to the 2016 drought when Mentone caught on fire. That we actually brought in the National Guard for. We didn't have the capacity for that. And that was Georgia that did that. And one of their fires came over on us. We got stopped on our side. They attempted a back burn or another firing technique, and it came back on us. And there was a 400-foot stretch of rock bluff that was like this that we couldn't get to, couldn't put a leaf blower on, and they kept just dumping water, dumping water, dumping water as that flame front was coming to it, and it helped. Now the big question is, what agency is going to pay for the bucket drops? There's nothing in our budget, there's nothing in a state budget. Maybe we can talk to Governor Ivey or the next governor pretty soon about getting an emergency allotment. State troopers have been very generous with their time. They can write off so many hours as training to do bucket drops with us. It's an interagency training. But once those hours run out, then there has to be a discussion about who's going to pay for that helicopter's time, the fuel, the pilot, all that good stuff. But the buckets they have are actually our own buckets. Now we have the dip buckets. They say Alabama Forestry Commission on the side. Now we have fixed wing aircraft that we do fire patrol and also forest pest patrol. And our pilot works really well with their pilot. I'm hoping, you know, they don't retire anytime soon, but ours is getting a little long in the tooth, so I'm hoping the next grade does pretty well. But yeah, we do have aerial assets, but it is not like out west where you see them come in and just lay down either the sticky red stuff or the water. That doesn't happen in Alabama. Because up until now, and again, never say never, we haven't needed it. But we do have helicopter capability. But that takes a few phone calls. Things only took one on my part.
Okay, well, we talked about having a plan, being prepared, being aware, things like that. Fire hits, obviously, first thing I'm gonna do is call 911. But what else do I do in that emergency? Hopefully I've got a plan, but when do I decide to evacuate? When do I, what's my thinking process perhaps in that emergency? I mean, what do I do in the event of emergency?
Well, it'd be up to the individual, what is your level of risk? Do you know your home? Do you know your capabilities? Do you have enough hose? Do you have enough water pressure? Do you want to stay there until either the fire service or we show up, and then leave it to, if the professionals tell you to evacuate, please pay attention to us. We don't want you to get hurt. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add something else. A go bag. If there's a risk, get yourself a go bag. Get your important papers and stuff together in a backpack or whatever. You're ready to go.
Oh, sure.
I think that hasn't been mentioned, so it's like,
Like I said, I'm thinking more outside, not inside. That's
yeah.
just my thing.
But I think that goes to that planning component.
Yeah.
But if you're not under evacuation order, there's a fire coming, you got hours maybe of time. Do you hook up your hoses? Do you put out ladders? Do you leave your house unlocked when you do evacuate?
I would, from my standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily leave the house unlocked. I wouldn't do that.
No, we don't need to go in your house.
Because if there's for some reason, if we need to get in your house to save it, we have a saying in the fire department, we don't lock it, but you can't lock it back. We'll get in. So, and we don't mind taking the door down if it needs to save the rest of the house. We're pretty good at that. Just to kind of what you said a minute ago, to kind of, in my mind, to walk you through the scenario. Let's say we've got something on one of the mountains here in Huntsville that's burning. Somebody is going to call in 911. They're going to get us a pretty good location. And it's going to hit 911 center, they're going to flip it to our dispatch for Huntsville Fire, if it's in the city of Huntsville. They're going to send, if it's an outside fire, it's hard to quantify a big fire, little fire, when it's on the outside, there's no structures involved. First thing that's going to happen is it's going to get one fire truck, one engine company, that's going to it, and they're going to have to either take care of the problem or to evaluate if they got a bigger problem. So they're going to have in the city, they're going to have usually a pretty fast response time. So we're talking minutes, and they'll be there. And then that first truck will either be able to pull the hoses off if it's close enough. They'll either pull the hoses off and put it out, or they're going to radio back and say, this is too far off the road, this is going to be a manual operation. Go ahead and send me about 4 more trucks right now and get enough manpower up there to do it. We're going to set up, as we were talking about earlier, we're going to set up a command. At that point, you'll have the fire trucks, and then you'll also have a district chief officer responding with them. That chief officer should set up a command immediately, and is going to evaluate how big of a problem we've got. And one of the things that we have done here locally in the past, even trying to get to it, we do have the capability of drones that we can put in the air, and we've used them on some of our fires here in the last few years of getting a drone in the air, and they've got the cameras on them, plus the FLIR cameras that can find the hot spots, and it can relay that back. We're going to evaluate really quick how big the fire is, which way it's moving. Okay, what's going to be the plan for extinguishing it? Are we going to be able to build fire breaks? Is the wind blowing so hard? As he alluded to earlier, building fire breaks is really good. But if we got a really windy day, if you don't build a huge fire break, the wind will blow the embers right across it and you're gone again. So we're going to have to start putting together a plan to do that. All that's going to be happening before we probably even consider evacuation. We're going to hit it with everything we've got before we ask people to evacuate. We're going to get in a situation where, hey, everything we got, we can't stop this. We got about this time when we need to be moving people out. Does that kind of, hope that helps a little bit, but that's what's going to happen. We're going to put up all resources we got, plus call forestry, and get them there, if nothing else, in advisory camp, at our command post,
So we're bringing the dozer just in case.
just in case.
Evacuation orders in Alabama are very, very rare. There was one in 2023 during the drought in Tuscaloosa, and some houses were lost, but that was before we got there. And that's the last one I can remember in recent memory. And that's when our state forester went to the governor and asked for a drought emergency declaration that enacted a statewide burn ban when we started losing homes. There's a lot of trigger points, there's a lot of steps before Alabama starts encroaching on you as property owners and homeowners, starts encroaching on your rights.
How would you get a evacuation order? Would that come across your phone like a lost child or anything like that, or how does that?
Agree.
I would tell you it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, I'm going to back up away from wildfires for just a moment. One of the positions I held was that I spent 12 years as captain on our hazmat team, and then I was chief of hazmat. So I've not only looked at wildland, I've had to look at, when I look at the railroad tracks come through Huntsville, when I look at tractor trailer trucks come through Huntsville, well, Redstone Arsenal out here, this ain't Mayberry. We got a lot of stuff that comes through here on plate tracks and everything else. So we've actually had to do plans. Our biggest thing we've worried about in the past was not for wildfire, but if we have a train derailment, if we have this, how do we evacuate? The problem comes in, it looks good on paper, but to actually have the manpower to solve the problem and try to evacuate is a tough thing. What we would typically do on that type of event, a lot of times the instant command, we work good, as we said, over with Huntsville Police. We have that love-hate relationship where we do actually like each other. We have a lot of fun joking each other too. But on that type of thing,
Even policemen need heroes.
yeah, they do. And I told them I ride on the truck every now and then. But we would look at that if we had, say, a chemical plume going somewhere. We've actually written plans for these type of scenarios. And the problem is, our guys are working. I need law enforcement to go in and tell the people to evacuate. Well, the people that needs to evacuate is right where the winds are blowing the plume. So now I'm seeing officers' life in danger. They don't need to be in there. It's a tough situation. And I can tell you, if we do evacuate, as you were saying earlier, if we do get to the point we say evacuate for the general public, get your stuff and go. Because we're going to tell you one time. And usually, we've had to ask people before they didn't want to evacuate, then, it's a little unorthodox, but if you give them a toe tag, they'll won't fit it out, they don't evacuate that, and then just walk off, they'll figure it out in a few minutes. But because that's sometimes your option, but it's going to be a tough thing. One of the things I've looked at, hopefully, if we have to do this here, I think we can work into a plan. The city does have a software program that will send out alerts to the public. You can sign up for it, and I apologize to y'all for not being telling the exact name of it. It's changed about 3 times, it's the same program. But I did talk to our dispatch today, no one's having this meeting tonight, to make sure they could still use it. And it can be set off from the communications in the mayor's office, or Huntsville Police, or Huntsville Fire. Either one can set that off with the 911 center if you're signed up on that community alert, whatever it is, if we do need to tell people.
Okay. Once we get that connection, we can probably add it to some
Yes.
of our information that we can
I
provide.
think at some point we will need an instant action plan, sitting on the shelf, that we can pull the trigger on if we have a problem, and all that needs to be written into the instant action plan as we move forward.
What other questions do we have?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. I was going to ask about that, if that applies to the summer months or year-round.
That's year-round. I believe.
This is from FEMA, it's a national risk map. We'll have a link to it with our information. But is it real time? It's real time.
I don't think weather was a big factor in that. I think a lot of that was based on density, certain risk, and there was another one. Just doing research, FEMA is a pretty good resource for us for information. NFPA is another good resource. There was also a place where you could key in your address, and there's like a gauge. It'll tell you if you're in a high dense area, different areas. I actually keep my address in, and I'm in the neighborhood, so I have a lot of density, but I was low on the other ones. But again, just, you know, relatively speaking, but just because of our area, we're at a low risk compared to other places in the country. But the main thing is to have the education. There is so much resources out there, and like the Forestry Commission talked about, you know, they've got handouts and stuff, but it does no good to do the research and get the information if people aren't willing to learn it and apply it. And I see these guys at several events where they're trying to educate the public, and you know, we work different events together. And to get the community to buy in is the key to it. Once you get the community to buy in, then it doesn't matter what that map says, you're going to be at a low risk. It's usually the areas you have the problem is where you don't get that buy-in. We talked about Pigeon Forge. That's a rental community. You know, people are not owning and living in those houses. They're renting them, you know, short-term rentals. And I don't know if it's the fire we're talking about, but I think it was a grill that caught it on fire. They put a grill up under a deck, caught it on fire, and went from one cabin, and burned half the mountain down. But you know, we see a big difference. There's two big factors. One, are they permanent residents or are they renters? We see a high occurrence among renters. The other thing is economical status. If it's a high income area, usually don't have that many occurrences of fires, whereas if it's a low income area, there's a higher occurrence of fires, whether they have the resources to do the things they do to keep their house up or whatever. But we don't usually see that, generally speaking, not only in Huntsville, but across the country when you're looking at fire stats on house fires. And I would say some of that is relative to wildland fires, where if you got somebody that's taking care of their yard, you know, keeping the vegetation down, cleaning out under the decks, using the right type of mulch no matter what it costs, and they're doing those things, then your community is going to be at a lower risk. Could emergencies happen? Yeah, you know, just because you're in that area doesn't mean something can't happen. But if it happens, it's easier for us to mitigate it versus being in another area that we can't cut it off. So I think that's a lot of the key is having the community buy-in in those areas. We're fortunate that a lot of our wooded areas, it's high property value. So people have the interest in taking care of those things. We just got to get the knowledge and buy-in with those individuals.
You know, something I would share, what we look at is the fire threat really broad. For example, I know we're talking where the woodlands and where stuff was up to it. But here in the city of Huntsville, Madison County, Limestone County, this whole area, right now is a peak that one of the things I'm thinking about as fire chief right now is farmers cutting weeds. We'll wind up with fields on fire after they cut weeds a lot of times this time of year. It's a seasonal thing. After they get through and stuff changes over, that threat will go away. And it used to not be as big a deal because technically they cut the weed, they've got the grain off of it. Okay, so what if it burns? As long as they haven't planted or drilled their beans in behind it, that's okay for the farmer. But now, where those big 100-acre bean fields used to be, there's a subdivision sitting right in the middle of it. So that's our next threat that we're looking at. It's just, it goes along with it. That'll go away here before long. But the other thing I did want to make sure everyone knows, we saw a lot of stuff on TV in California. And one of the things you kept hearing was no water, no water, no water. That's not our case here. Just so everybody knows, one of the things where Huntsville Fire Department has got an ISO Class 1 rating, which is extremely hard to achieve. Part of that holding on to that rating is we open and turn on every fire hydrant in the city of Huntsville at least once a year. We check them, we flow test them every 5 years, and each engine company, each station has got their zone, and that's part of their daily operations throughout the spring and summer as they go out. And we got records. We've got a database records on computer of every hydrant in the city of Huntsville, when it was turned on, did it flow, is there any kind of problem with this that we turn in, and if there's any kind of maintenance to go with it, our guys in the field flip it to Dan's office, and they correspond with the water department to make sure that repair gets made. So I just want everybody to know the one advantage we do have is by fire code, in the city of Huntsville, we do have fire hydrants pretty close to structures as required by code. So we do have a water source, and that's super helpful for right where the house is. It doesn't help us a quarter mile down the woods, as they stand, but we got something different. But
Different tactics, different tools.
that's exactly right.
What was the question?
I live on Green Mountain, and so I kind of have two questions. One is there's a lot of building up there, and Woodland Homes is up there. And I wanted to know, one, is does this fire department or whatever work with builders like that to make sure that fire hydrants are where they're supposed to be and roads are the way they're supposed to be? But also, one of the big issues that we have up there is water pressure, because there's so many people that live up there, and they were supposed to put more water, whatever, up there. So I'm wondering, is that all something that developers of communities are actively working with the fire department to make sure that those things that we can't control, like water pressure, is taken care of?
I'm actually very familiar with what you're talking about up there, because we have actually kept a check on that. We have actually kept a check on it, we're checking our hydrants and stuff, and we've actually had a conversation with Huntsville Utilities. I know a time or two in the last couple of years, they've actually asked the residents on Green Mountain to conserve their water. But I will tell you, from me talking to them on the pressure and stuff that we've got up there and our quantity of water in the hydrant, they were being actually, when they did that, it scared a lot of people, rightly so. But the reality was they were being very proactive. In other words, they were asking people to conserve before we actually got to the problem. They could see something coming with everybody trying to water their yards at the same time and the capacity up there. Because I was double checking with them, hey, I need to know, if we have a fire up here, is that hydrant got the amount of water in it I need coming from the tank? And I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable with what we got up there. Would I like it to be better in a few places? Probably. But they are working toward keeping that up, and they are monitoring that really, really well.
Because they're building quite a bit up there, and so we already had a problem before, and
Yes.
then where stuff comes. And they were supposed to put another
I'm familiar with, as far as I know, Huntsville Utilities is working diligently toward trying to watch that and keep that up. I don't remember, Dan, how much of that comes to us on that?
Yeah, so the way the city procedure works is when they want to create a subdivision, it goes through a subdivision process, and we're part of that process. We check to make sure we have access to water during that process. In order for anybody to build a home, they have to have something saying that they have adequate water to support that structure. And there was a couple of years ago where Huntsville Utilities had limited the construction on Green Mountain, but I do know that they was taking steps to improve the situation up there. And the last I heard that they was allowing more homes to go up there. The thing about water, with it being a high elevation, you don't just naturally have water up there. It has to be pumped up there. And then when you pump it up there, you're losing pressure with the elevation and the friction within the pipe. So it limits you to water up there. Now, obviously, they put tanks up there. We've seen in other places they've installed tanks. I don't have recent knowledge of what they're doing, but typically when we see issues like that, they look at adding a tank or pumps or running a bigger pipe up there, and those kinds of things. But I do know, like, after that situation happened, I asked about it, and they said, yeah, we're allowing more houses to be built up there. So my impression of whatever issue they had addressed. I do not know of any current issues up there. But I will tell you that they're part of the planned subdivision process too. They come to the subdivision. We have an internal subdivision meeting before it goes to the subdivision committee. And part of that internal meetings is you got all these different departments that are there, traffic engineering, fire, Huntsville Utilities, that have an opportunity to speak against the development. And if Huntsville Utilities can't provide water, they're like, hey, we got an issue. We currently don't have water there. It's going to be a while before we get water. And then that affects whether or not the subdivision committee would approve it or not, or if it even goes to subdivision committee. If it's a road problem, I'm like, listen, we don't have adequate access. 20-foot wide roads. The elevation's too steep. We can't navigate it with the trucks. And then they have to get all that designed and sorted out before it goes and gets approved by the city of Huntsville. And a lot of times this happens years before you actually didn't see the subdivision. I had a subdivision that they started building when I became fire marshal, and it had been approved for like 10 years, but they never built it. And then all of a sudden, as the city grew, I think it was south, then all of a sudden, we're seeing houses. I'm like, when did this come through subdivision? They're like, oh, it was approved a while ago. They just never actually built the houses. But the city is good, like Chief said, our water requirements is pretty strict to get that ISO 1 rating. And there's no area exempt. Green Mountain is included in our rating. So we have to meet the requirements up there just like we do everywhere else. And a couple of weeks ago, it was funny, we had a resident call and said, hey, there's a black bag on my fire hydrant. And I looked in the system, we didn't have it listed as service in our system. So I had to backtrack it, and I think Chief actually got the complaint. I had to backtrack it. Turns out our crews went out there, turned the hydrant on. When we shut it off, it had a leak. So they turned in utilities. Utilities went out there, realized we got to replace this. So they bag it to show it's out of service. So if we respond to emergency, we grab the next hydrant, we don't hook to that one. It's a safety thing, but for a resident, it's like, my hydrant's out, I don't have no water. Well, we just have to go a couple hundred more feet, which is not a big deal for us to get water. But it happened so quick from the time that we identified the leak, they bagged it, and I was checking up on it, it was only 6 days. And then I probably guarantee you now that hydrant's probably already been replaced. We deal with, the city has a lot of fire hydrants. We usually are managing about 150 that need to be repaired, whether they're hard to turn on, need to be greased, cap is stuck, or there's a leak or something. And then my deputy fire marshal is our water officer. He's in constant communication. We deal with 5 different water authorities in the city of Huntsville because we're so large. Huntsville Utilities is only one of them. So he has to communicate with all these water authorities and make sure that these hydrants are fixed and repaired.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I would personally, and on behalf of the Land Trust, like to thank our panelists today. There's a lot of great information, a lot of things to think about, and so we're going to have this information available on our website. We recorded the session today. That will be available on our website, so that we'll have this information available for you. We're going to update this PowerPoint that we have here with some of the information and the links and things like that we've got tonight. So that'll be available as well. And we'll work with the City of Huntsville so it's available through them as well. And one of the things we've talked about, I've talked to Chief McFarland about this, we hope, fingers crossed, we might do a follow-up program, maybe closer to the fall, sometime there, where we can actually talk with the fire chief at Pigeon Forge and talk a little bit about lessons learned and some things like that, about how that community responded to that emergency. And,
we've got a North Alabama Fire Chiefs Association, and several months after they had that fire up there, the chief of Pigeon Forge, he actually came down and met with us and did a full PowerPoint presentation of lessons learned. And super nice guy out there. Matter of fact, I reached out to him today when we had this meeting, and I'm waiting for him to call me back. It's possible we could see that same presentation, but they had a lot of lessons learned from it.
So keep an eye out on our website. If there's no more questions or anything, we'll go ahead and wrap up for tonight. But I thank you. There's information on the back table here. Take what we've got and share the information with your neighbors and your community, family and friends. It's important to get everybody aware and educated. What if? So thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate it.